Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, Johanne Jayaratne, Executive Director of Airport and Aviation Services, joins us on the program as we discuss the many issues and challenges confronting the travel and aviation industry. The LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index shed 6 basis points in August. More on this from Nielsen's Managing Director, Sharang Pant. And we bring the program to a close with a look at Sri Lanka's macro outlook with LMD's columnist Shiran Fernando. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello and thank you for tuning in to Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. We continue our focus on Sri Lanka's travel and aviation industry, and today we have invited to our studios Johanne Jayaratne, Executive Director of Airport and Aviation Services, and he will give us his insights and his takes on the challenges, issues and maybe some of the solutions that are going to be prevalent in the industry. Welcome to Benchmark, Johanne.
Thank you for having me, Savitri.
Good to have you on the show. Thinking off the top of my head, very little is known about airport and aviation services. So just briefly, what is the role that airport and aviation services actually plays in the bigger part of travel and aviation?
Yes. Typically, airport aviation is synonymous with BIA, but we play a much bigger role in Sri Lanka. We have 2 airports, international airports under our purview, that is Mattala International and BIA, and also 2 domestic airports, Ratmalana and Batiklo. And in time, as these airports are released for commercial usage, they will come under our purview. That is one aspect of it, airport management. The other is fire and rescue and security, aviation security. Those are also particular mandates that come under us. And most importantly, we are also the air navigation service provider for Sri Lanka. That comes under our purview. We have about 650,000 square miles of airspace that comes under our purview, and we manage that airspace. So we play a much bigger role than what is known. So this is something that I think our audience should really focus on.
So what's Sri Lanka's airport and the travel and tourism and aviation industry looking like to you at the moment?
Very positive, very positive. Just to give you some numbers, last year there were about 1.2 million plus tourists in 2017. In 2018, that number has been 1.3 million up to July. So it is quite possible that we will surpass 2 million tourist arrivals in 2018. So we are looking forward to it.
Now, Johanne, while all that is very good, Sri Lankan Airlines is ranked 95th out of 335 airlines in the Skytrax World Airline Awards. It fell 10 places. And Sri Lanka also fell 1 place when it comes to the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index, while countries like India went up, and even some of the others in the region were pushing themselves up. Now, how is Sri Lanka's aviation industry performing compared to others in the region?
We are doing very well. If you look at the aviation sector from a airport standpoint, if you may, we went through an IQ audit recently, and we were ranked number 1 in South Asia. I believe we are 14 in the region, and 19 or something in the world. So in that sense,
but
we are
that's
okay.
something we have always had a good record.
Yes,
at,
we've
right?
always had a good record on that. But with regard to tourism, China, India, and I believe the UK are the main sources of tourism for Sri Lanka. Having said that, what I see lacking from a tourism standpoint is the level of service. And that has to increase. That has really be addressed, and it is being addressed. From an aviation standpoint, from an airport standpoint, what we do have is a challenge with regard to capacity. We are about 46% over capacity at BIA right now. And we have a stage 2 coming up, which is kind of stuck a little bit because the engineering bid and what came through was there was a 46% difference in the pricing. So this is something that we need to address. And what we have done is we've come up with a temporary terminal solution, what we call an interim terminal, which can move about 2 million passengers it's a departure terminal, and that will be up and running by the first quarter of next year. So that will ease some of the burden that we have right now. So these are the issues that we have to deal with. But if you look at the global market, there are countries around us that are much more competitive with regard to tourism and the rates and so on and so forth. So these things have to be addressed, and it is being addressed. But I think it has to be given top priority, if you may.
Now, fuel prices, exchange volatility, how does that impact?
It's quite unfortunate, actually, because we are the second most expensive with regard to aviation fuel in the region, and this has to be addressed. And as you probably know, CPC has a monopoly on this, and I personally would like to see some competitors coming in to get this fuel rate down. Exchange rate volatility, I mean, it affects the entire spectrum at what we are at, about 161 against the dollar today. So these are not very good with regard to how business should be done.
If we look at the challenges that Sri Lanka has to face to become more competitive, to become more acceptable in the region, what are those challenges, do you think?
From an aviation standpoint, I would say that our ground handling, which is handled by Sri Lankan Airlines as well, that has to be brought under control. We are considered to be very, very expensive in the region, probably the most expensive according to other airlines. So that has to be brought under control. The tourism sector has to, like I said before, has to address the quality of service and bring that up to par. And I think that will make us much more competitive. But I mean, all said and done, I mean, we are still a desired destination, and that's a good thing. But we need to capitalize on it.
Do you think we have enough airlines coming in for the numbers that we seek? And also, is Sri Lankan Airlines competitive?
We have 27 airlines flying in right now. We have 3 more in the pipeline for this year. Aeroflot being one, Edelweiss out of Switzerland is another, and then there's Lion Air that's also going to start operations. So from an airline standpoint, we are all right, and that's not an issue. Like I said, the ground handling has to be brought under control. With regard to Sri Lankan Airlines, they're going through the restructuring program right now. They will probably contract before they expand, and that's a good thing. And I'm sure that they will pick up on destinations which bring in high value tourism into Sri Lanka.
Now, there's been some rhetoric about bringing in PPPs to manage the airport, for instance, Mattala Airport with India, according to Deputy Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation. How can public-private partnerships spur industry growth?
It's a dual-edged sword, because with PPPs, I mean, there has to be an ROI. And with regard to airports, the ROIs are very, very long. It's about 25 to 30 year, periods that we are looking at. So it's a good thing to look at conceptually. With regard to Mattala, the Indian proposal is a good proposal, and it's being negotiated right now, and that should probably come to pass very, very soon. With regard to domestic aviation, there has been a lot of talk about PPPs as well, but the ROI is a question, because I mean, aeronautical revenue doesn't quite cut the bill, so it has to be non-aeronautical revenue, and in order to create non-aeronautical revenue, you need to have land space available around these airports to develop, for example, hotels or whatever it might be, and that's not the case in Sri Lanka. We have 14 domestic airports, and about 5 of them are probably commercially feasible. So PPP models have come and gone, and it's been discussed every now and then, but nothing has really come to pass yet.
And any proposals for more to get the numbers that we desire where tourism is concerned, for instance?
Absolutely. We are very open. We have a slot committee which decides on which flights, what times that these airlines can come in. And we are constantly in contact with these airlines. So it's the doors are open. It's up to them to figure out their business model and bring these tourists in.
So you mentioned the domestic aviation. We will discuss that immediately after this commercial break, Johanne. Coming up after the break, Johanne Jayaratne expands on which policies could actually promote domestic aviation and also how much more improvement our infrastructure needs. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
$8,500 done. 1,500 go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money.
You're crazy.
Crazy for money. 10,000 steps done. Who the man? I do it every single day. Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
Thank you for staying with us on Benchmark. We resume our discussion with the Executive Director of Airport and Aviation Services, Johanne Jayaratne. Johanne, what would be the impact of developing another international airport? You said there's 5 more which are feasible. Now there's talk of a third one in Hinguragoda. What is the feasibility?
Good question. Personally, my opinion is that 2 international airports should suffice to meet the demands of Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka being a very small footprint, but Hinguragoda has its own characteristic because the government policy is to improve tourism in that region and bring in the cultural triangle and all of that. So that would probably be the case for Hinguragoda. But the thing is, any airline that flies into Sri Lanka is not going to touch 2 points in Sri Lanka. It's not feasible. It's not commercially feasible. So we have to attract airlines to that particular destination as the only destination that they will touch in Sri Lanka. So these are the challenges from an aviation standpoint. I mean, we can open up international airports all over the place, but that doesn't quite cut the bill. If you look at the Mattala location, believe it or not, its access to the cultural triangle is much faster than out of BIA. So these are things that have to be looked at very carefully and studied before you open up these airports. But Hinguragoda is already there. The runway is there. It needs a little bit of touch up, if you may, and it will be ready for commercial operations.
And if it is international, all immigration services, the whole 9 yards would have to be installed.
Yes,
right?
it would be a mini BIA essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what policies do you think would actually help promote domestic aviation?
There was a World Bank study done a few years ago, and the result of the study was that domestic aviation will not take off in Sri Lanka, pardon the pun, until 2036. However, there is a great push right now to get domestic aviation up and running. in my opinion, the ticket price to anywhere in Sri Lanka should be under $100. And unfortunately, we had to talk in dollar terms, and that's not the best right now. And I'm talking round trip. We are somewhat there because there's an airline that flies out of Ratmalana to Batiklo at $100 one way. So we are getting there, but the numbers are not yet there. One positive step is that Helitours, run by Air Force, has ceased operations because that was a huge detriment to the domestic aviation market. And with them stopping their operation, the domestic aviation market, the private sector, if you may, has a chance to survive because Helitours was undercutting the market big time at one point. But that, once again, it's all about numbers. You need to have at least a 30-seater aircraft to do these routes in order to make some sort of impact. But to get a 30-seater, the load factor on a 30-seater is still a challenge.
Would you like to see the private sector more involved in this domestic aviation sector?
Absolutely, absolutely. It has to be, because that's where the competitiveness comes in and the service quality comes in. Because right now we have only one or two airlines, domestic airlines that are operating, and that's not enough. But then again, that being said, there is not much room for multiple players because the market is so small.
What priority infrastructure would be needed to be put in place if we are going to have an up and running domestic airport?
Infrastructure is already there. We just need to update some of these airports. So, for instance, Sigiriya, Koggala are two airports that have been talked about quite a bit. And if the market demands it, then we will definitely develop it, just like we did with Batiklo, to get the Pasikuda segment up and running. So it's already there. It's just a question of identifying, which airports need to be updated, and that's market demand. And if it justifies it, yes, we will go ahead and do the necessity.
Now, Cabinet has approved Digana as an airport, a domestic airport. Would these things be feasible, looking at our road infrastructure, the amount of time a tourist spends on the road, especially to get to Kandy or in that vicinity? How do you think, again, investment put in, how much would they be able to get out of it?
As I said earlier, airports don't really have the kind of ROI to make things justifiable on the short term commercially, but it's infrastructure, and if, like I said, the market demands it, then it should be built.
Speaking of infrastructure, while Sri Lanka is clamoring to get those numbers in, what more needs to be done to get our infrastructure improved? There are times when the immigration lines are so long and everything is just a big crowded house.
I address this question quite often. BIA has 19 entities under its umbrella that we don't have any control over. Immigration being one, customs being another, quarantine being something else. So these agencies should be brought in line with the national requirement. However, all said and done, immigration has improved quite a bit, and so have the other agencies, and it's just a question of aligning them with a common goal, and that is being addressed right now.
So just as a final question, Johanne, what are the prospects you see for Sri Lanka's aviation industry maybe for the rest of 2018?
2018 is looking good. Like I said, we have 3 new airlines coming in. We are also faced with a challenge with regard to the interim terminal and getting the terminal capacity up and running, and that's underway, thankfully. But everything else is very much in place. I mean, we are considering international standards and how we compare with other nations. We are right there on top. So everything is looking very good, except for this capacity crunch that we are dealing with.
Thank you, Johanne. Great talking to you.
Good talking to you as well.
So we've been chatting with Johanne Jayaratne, the Executive Director of Airport and Aviation Services, on travel and aviation sector here in Sri Lanka. Anushan Silvaraja comes up on the other side with more.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
$8,500 done. 1,500 go. Hoorah!
What on earth are you doing?
I'm making money.
You're crazy.
Crazy for money. 10,000 steps done. Who the man? I do it every single day. Show me the money.
So you run 10,000 steps every day, huh? You must be fit.
Some days I do 20,000. Hoorah!
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on the LMD Nielsen Business Confidence Index. Joining me is the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharan Pan. Welcome back to the show, Sharan. Now, the PCI has been on a downward trend. What are the sensitivities behind this?
So the anxiety seems to be returning in terms of business sentiments or consumer sentiments. There are mixed feelings. At one side, the growth performance of exports is pretty good, close to 10%. The tourist inflow or the revenue from tourism is also increasing close to 15%. But at the same time, the inflation has now moved up back close to 4% in the month of July. The foreign exchange rate is also declining. The rupee has crossed almost the 160 mark. As a result, the sentiments, business sentiments have dropped. In the latest month, we saw the sentiments at 95 compared to 101 from the previous month. So this level of 95 in the month of August is 3 points lower than what we saw in April when it was at 98.
Could you just highlight the most pressing business and national issues that we face at this point in time?
So business leaders are continuing to talk about taxes. With the recent change in corporate tax and personal income tax, they feel that their businesses as well as consumption from the demand side will be under pressure. So that comes right at the top with almost 100% of them calling it out. Following that is the currency rate. So almost 3 in 4 talk about currency rate as an issue which is impacting their cost of doing business. The rest, when we talk about inflation, it comes up as the next possible issue. The drop in demand is coming up as a business concern. Talking about issues or national issues, it's still politics and economic stability or policy stability which are at the top. Almost everyone talks about it. And the third one is around education and what's the future for workforce in Sri Lanka, which 1 in 2 business leaders are calling it out as a national issue.
So how does the business sector view business prospects rather going forward over the short term and the long term?
So what business leaders are saying is only about 8% of them say they expect the economy to improve going forward in the next 12 months. This level is same as what we saw in the previous month. When it comes to their own business, about 19% of them, or 1 in 5, feel that the business will improve in the next 12 months. So there's a marginal improvement in that, and we feel that is more to do with an outward sentiment or a positive sentiment they want to maintain in the long term. But in the short term, the percentages are more or less the same. Only about 15% of the business leaders feel that the business or the growth will improve in the next 3 months.
So what sort of prediction could you give us for the BCI going forward, Sharan?
So it's going to be at this particular level in the range of 95 to 100 for the next few months. Again, with the elections, the provincial elections coming up in 2019, there might be some upward movement because of policy changes. Let's hope it happens soon. But for the next few months, we don't see any revival as of now.
Thank you very much for joining us, Sharan.
Thank you.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Sharan Pan. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
LMD is making waves, airwaves. The next big thing from Sri Lanka's pioneering business journal, LMD Podcast, now online. Listen to our articles on the go at www.lmd.lk. Select, play, listen. It's that simple.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
Welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushin Selvaraj. Now for a closer look at the latest on our economy. Joining me is economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Welcome back to the show, Shiran. Now, to start off with the recent global events, how are they affecting our economy?
Sure. So thanks for having me back. I think this year in particular, we're seeing significant impact from what's going on globally. You've had from, I think, second quarter, maybe from February, March actually onwards, these bouts of volatility happening. And what I'm talking about is in terms of the financial markets on one side. So you've seen issues with Argentina, you've seen issues with Pakistan, you've seen issues with now the recent issue with Turkey as well. And all of that has had a negative impact on the perception towards markets like Sri Lanka. So we're classed in what we call emerging market assets. And as a result, we've seen, in particular the region has seen a significant level of outflows from its local market. And that has had an impact both in terms of where some of the domestic interest rate yields are going. Some of the central banks have actually increased their interest rates, and in terms of the currency pressure. And I think if you look at the currency pressure in particular, we're seeing now the rupee, weakening, and it has weakened consecutively, especially in recent weeks. And the key reason for this is because of a strengthening dollar and what is happening globally in terms of some of the other currencies also under pressure. So while we've seen about 5.5%, close to about 6% depreciation this year, countries like India have seen close to about 11.5% depreciation, and one of the worst performing currencies in Asia. And similar trends are seen in Indonesia. Pakistan had its issues as well. So overall, it's very negative right now. I think that's a concern. And the concern is whether this will carry on for the rest of the year, and will this be a sign of things to come with global interest rates rising.
On that note then, Shiran, how is the financial account of the country performing right now?
So in the first half of this year, we've seen exports actually not growing as much as it did last year. And especially in the months of April, May and June, the growth actually maybe plateauing a little. And so we've only seen about 6 to 7% growth this year, whereas imports have grown about 12%. So as a result of that, you've seen an expansion in the trade deficit by about 20%, which is not desirable. Though other items, if you look at it, remittances is pretty much flat. You've seen the same level of inflows that you saw last year, and tourism has seen above 10% growth in most months, and that will, I think, continue for the rest of the year as well. As a result, I think once again the stories of the last few years going out to the market, we've had to borrow commercial debt. That has been done rather successfully. Future financial flows are coming in through, I think, a syndicated loan with China. The central bank is looking at a panda bond, another 250 million. Basically, I think this year is largely about building the reserves.
Now, the new fuel price formula, Shiran, it's been in operation for a couple of months now. How is that done? Is it working?
So it's too early to say whether it's working in the sense of it curtailing demand or because of the price rises we've seen, whether people are now making those choices to maybe use it less, things like that. So it's early in the game to say that. It will not really reflect in a decline in the import bill because you're really correcting your domestic prices rather than what you're importing at. But I think what will happen is possibly this will correct a bit of the outstanding debts that CPC, for example, has, ease that burden, and ease the burden in the system in terms of easing the loans that are taken from the state banks, and that cycle basically getting a bit more easier without continuing to accumulate debt, which then gets pushed on to this the banking system. So it's too early to say. I think you need to wait it out, and people are still, I think, understanding the formula and its implementation. It'll be interesting to see when global oil prices reduce what that impact will be, and I think that will be the key thing to look out for as well.
Thank you very much for joining us, Shiran. That was economist and LMD columnist Shiran Fernando. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.